You're not where you thought you were. It's not even the same world. The air feels different, thicker, maybe, warmer. You're standing on a high patch of open grassland, but this isn't some modern prairie. The plants are all off, tougher, coarser, shorter. Trees dot the landscape here and there, but they're not the familiar oaks or maples. These are scrappy, ancient-looking things, half adapted to a world shifting beneath their roots. The wind smells earthy and sharp, tinged with something wild you can't name. You've landed in the Miocene epoch, roughly 23 to 5 million years ago, and North America has just begun to resemble the continent you know. Just barely. You're somewhere in the middle of it, what might one day be Nebraska or Wyoming, but back now, this was a battleground of evolutionary trial and error. And you're not alone. You catch movement in the tall grass to your left. A flick of motion, low to the ground, fast. You don't see what it is. Then from the right, a shadow sweeps past overhead. A bird? More like a featherless, reptilian kite with knife blade talons. Something prehistoric? Definitely. But none of them hold your attention the way this thing does. Across the plain, about 100 yards away, it appears, half emerging from the trees, half manifesting from your nightmares. You've never seen anything like it. It's big, like really big. Horse tall at the shoulder, longer than a lion. Muscular but rangy. It moves with the power of a tank and the twitchiness of a predator, like it's always just on the edge of exploding forward. Its head, if you can call that a head, is massive, out of proportion to the rest of it. A boxy skull packed with bone-thick muscle attachments and fronted by jaws that gape wider than any normal carnivore's. You can't stop staring. You also can't quite guess what this thing is supposed to be. It has hooves, but those teeth are all wrong. Its body says mammal, but its face says something else. Something ancient, alien. You're looking at Daeodon. This is the top predator of this time and place. It's not a cat, not a dog, not even really a pig, though it shares some features with all of them. It's part of a group called Entelodonts, but the name most people land on is simpler, punchier, and more accurate than anything Latin can offer. Hell pig. Daeodon didn't last long, geologically speaking. Just a few million years at most, a blink in Earth's timeline. But in that blink, it ruled. And not just ruled. It loomed, terrorized, bullied, and feasted its way across the continent. If you were a Miocene animal smaller than a bison, this was the last face you wanted to see. And here's the part that should keep you up tonight. We don't fully understand it. We've got bones, some spectacular ones. We know it was huge, omnivorous, probably smart. But most of what we say about Daeodon? Educated guesses, pattern finding, behaviors stitched together from anatomy and comparison. It's a puzzle with half the pieces missing, and the ones we do have are chewed and scattered. Still, the bones tell enough of a story. Enough to make your imagination run wild. Enough to paint a picture of an animal that didn't just survive in its world. It owned it. Right now, that Daeodon out on the plain hasn't seen you. You're not part of its world. But that might change. It lifts its head, sniffs the air. You don't move. You don't breathe. And the wind shifts. Let's wind it back. Before we chase this creature any farther, you need some context. The Miocene wasn't just some random prehistoric backdrop. It was a pressure cooker. A transition zone. Think of it as Earth reconfiguring itself, not with fire and floods, but with slow, grinding shifts that changed everything. North America was cooling down from its hot, swampy Eocene and Oligocene past. Forests thinned. Grasslands exploded. This was the era where open spaces started winning. That one change, trees to grass, set off a cascade of evolutionary adjustments. Animals needed to run farther, spot predators sooner, chew tougher plants, compete in a more exposed environment. And for the meat eaters, it meant you had to be fast, smart, and ruthless. That's the world Daeodon came up in. But it didn't just adapt to it. It was made for it. It was a perfect product of the Miocene, even if its time at the top would be short. You're going to walk alongside it. You're going to see how it rose, how it thrived, and how it fell. And you're going to see what a creature like this really tells us about ecosystems, extinction, power, and maybe even ourselves. But don't worry. You don't need to run. You're not prey here. You're just the ghost watching the past unfold. And right now, that past is loud, hot, and alive. Another Daeodon calls in the distance, more roar than grunt. Your bones feel it more than your ears. The one on the plane answers. You've officially stepped into their world. Now that you've stepped into the Miocene, you need to get a better look at the monster that rules it. You can't just admire it from a distance. You need to get closer. Follow it. Stalk it even. Because if you want to understand Daeodon, what it was, how it lived, why it mattered, you've got to watch it move through its world. There it is, just beyond the next rise. You crouch low, silent. It hasn't seen you. Not that it would care, you're not real here. You're an observer, a shadow in time. It steps forward and the full picture hits you. This thing is absurdly big. The average Daeodon stood around 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighed close to 2,000 pounds. That's moose-sized but built like a battering ram. All chest and muscle and bone. But it's not a lumbering beast. Not at all. There's grace in its stride, spring-loaded energy, like a coiled predator. You can see the flexibility in the spine, the long legs made for covering ground. And that head. The head is a unit. Over 3 feet long. That's most of its body length right there. It's not just big, it's weaponized. The snout is deep and wide, the jaw built to crack, crush, pulverize. Its teeth don't look like what you'd expect from a pig or a scavenger. They're part molar, part canid, part nightmare. Blunt premolars for bone, sharp canines for ripping, and incisors that could shear flesh. And here's the kicker. Daeodon wasn't some slow-moving bone cruncher. It could run. Not forever, not cheetah fast, but fast enough to chase. Fast enough to close. Its limbs were long and surprisingly slender for something this size, with 2 weight-bearing toes tipped in hoof-like structures. That's a trait it inherited from its artiodactyl ancestry. Daeodon was part of the even-toed ungulate group. You know, pigs, deer, camels, goats. Not a lineup you'd expect a monster to come from. But here it is. Evolution's curveball. You notice something else. That broad skull has bony flanges, wide, flat projections near the cheeks. Not horns. Not antlers. Just strange, almost decorative bone growths. Some paleontologists think they were for muscle attachment, helping power those devastating jaw muscles. Others suspect display, maybe something to intimidate rivals, attract mates, or both. And you know what? It works. Even now, with only the knowledge of the structure, the sheer presence of that face makes you want to take a step back. Daeodon moves through the grass like it owns the place, because it does. Every other animal seems to react to it. A herd of small rhinoceroses, yes, they're here too, edges away. A pack of prehistoric dogs stiffens, waits, lets it pass. This isn't just top of the food chain. It's top of the fear chain. But here's where things get interesting. Daeodon wasn't a pure carnivore. It was an omnivore and an opportunist. It would scavenge, hunt, steal, root around for tubers, crunch bones for marrow, eat carrion, maybe even crack open eggs or raid nests. Think of it as a walking garbage disposal with the attitude of a predator. The key trait wasn't just power, it was adaptability. You follow it longer. It stops at a kill site. Something big died here recently, a calicother, maybe. Its body's half consumed. Daeodon doesn't hesitate. It charges in, scattering a few smaller scavengers. You notice how it doesn't just pick over the meat, it devours it. Grabs a chunk, jerks its head side to side, swallows. Then it plants a hoof on the ribcage and crunches down. The sound isn't like breaking a twig. It's like snapping a cinder block. This isn't casual snacking. This is resource domination. The smaller carnivores watch from a distance. They won't risk it. Daeodon is a killer by opportunity. If one of them steps close, it won't hesitate to add another corpse to the pile. And yet, there's something strange in its eyes. Something alert. Intelligent even. Entelodonts had relatively large brain cases for their size, especially in regions related to olfaction. They could smell like bloodhounds. That massive snout wasn't just for show. It was a biological GPS. Daeodon could detect blood, decay, movement, territory markings, anything that told it where to eat, where to fight, or where to avoid. It lifts its head again. listens, and then it growls, not loud but guttural. A warning. Something nearby has its attention. You spin to see what it's watching and you spot it. Another Daeodon, approaching slow, cautious. Maybe a rival. Maybe a mate. Hard to tell. There's tension now. The first Daeodon lowers its head slightly, its body language shifting. Less feeding. More claiming. You're not going to get a fight yet, but the seeds are there. This species didn't form structured packs like wolves, but they weren't solitary either. They might have lived in loose groups, clans, maybe. That theory comes from fossil sites like agate fossil beds, where multiple individuals have been found together. It wasn't cooperation. It was more like proximity with rules. You keep watching as the newcomer circles, then backs off. No conflict, for now. But the message is clear: don't test me. You think about its name again. Daeodon shoshinensis. Daeodon means hostile teeth. Apartment. The genus was named in 1878 based on fossils found in South Dakota. The species name came later, tacked on after larger, more complete specimens were dug up from Nebraska's Badlands. The bones stunned paleontologists. This wasn't just an entelodont, it was the biggest one ever found. And you're watching it move through the Miocene like a force of nature. It's not the apex predator in the way you think of a lion or tiger. It doesn't need stealth or speed or perfect predation strategy. It doesn't need a pack. It doesn't even need a perfect kill. What it needs is presence. Size, power, smell, the ability to show up, push everything else aside, and take what it wants. Daeodon didn't master its world by finesse. It ruled by intimidation. And the weird thing? It worked. For a while. But this isn't a story with a happy ending. You know that already. So as you keep watching it fade into the tall grass, tail swinging behind it, snout still low, still hunting, remember, this isn't just an animal. It's a fossil in motion. A predator on borrowed time. A giant that came, saw, conquered, and then vanished. For now, though, it's still king. And you're still chasing it. You want to understand Daeodon? Then you need to dig deeper, literally. Because this animal didn't pop into existence out of nowhere. It's the last and largest chapter in a long, weird lineage that goes back tens of millions of years. So let's rewind. Before Daeodon, before the Miocene, before the rise of grasslands and saber-toothed cats, there was a family of creatures stalking the ancient world that looked like they were built from spare parts. Biologists call them entelodonts, but most people just call them what they look like: hell pigs. Here's the catch: they're not actually pigs. Not really. Entelodonts were artiodactyls, which means they're technically part of the even-toed ungulate group, the same big evolutionary bucket as deer, camels, goats, cows, and yes, pigs. But they're not direct ancestors of pigs. They're more like weird cousins that took a very different evolutionary path. Picture a boar. Now stretch it. Make it taller, bulkier, longer-limbed. Give it a massive skull with cheekbone flanges and jaws that could dislocate like a python's. Add a brain wired for aggression and a stomach that didn't care if what it was eating was meat, bone, plant, or rotting carrion. That's an entelodont. The first ones show up in the fossil record during the Eocene epoch, maybe 37 to 40 million years ago. These early species, like Archaeotherium, weren't quite as massive as Daeodon, but they were still intimidating. They lived in North America and Asia, and they were already showing the key features that would define their group: long limbs for traveling, robust skulls, powerful jaws, and omnivorous teeth. Imagine one of these walking through a subtropical forest. Not running, not hiding, just existing in that weird, overbuilt way that tells every other animal to keep its distance. These weren't specialist hunters. They didn't need to be. Their whole design said, "Try me." And that's the theme with entelodonts, bully anatomy. They weren't apex predators in the traditional sense. They didn't rely on ambush or speed or precision. Instead, they got big, scary, and hard to kill. They evolved into aggressive opportunists, something that could run you down, eat your eggs, fight your parents, and then sleep on your carcass. As the Eocene rolled into the Oligocene, entelodonts spread. New species popped up across Eurasia and North America. They diversified, got bigger, bolder, We see signs of complex behavior in the fossils, pathologies in bones that suggest brutal fights, maybe between rivals, healed fractures, teeth marks on other entelodonts. These animals lived hard lives. The Oligocene is when things start to really shift. Forests thin out. The climate cools. Grasslands start to take over. Some animals struggle. Entelodonts? And then we get to the early Miocene, around 20 million years ago. This is when everything lines up for the birth of something new, something bigger. One of those North American lineages evolves into something we'll eventually name Daeodon shoshonensis. The fossils show up in places like agate fossil beds in Nebraska. That site's a treasure trove, entelodont bones mixed with rhinos, camels, early dogs, rodents, birds. A snapshot of an entire ecosystem in flux. And Daeodon is the heavyweight. This species takes everything the entelodonts were good at and cranks the dial to 11. Bigger skull, longer legs, heavier body, stronger bite force. It's not a new design. It's the final form of a blueprint that started tens of millions of years earlier. But here's the wild part. They didn't change much. The basic entelodont body plan stayed consistent over time. That tells you something. It worked. It didn't need fixing. Evolution doesn't reward innovation for its own sake. It rewards survival. And this design survived, again and again, across changing climates and shifting continents. You can imagine that ancient lineage like a fuse, burning slowly through time. Each step, Archaeotherium, Entelodon, Oentelodon, Perientelodon, building pressure, testing limits. And when it hits the Miocene, it detonates in the form of Daeodon. But that explosion is brief. Daeodon's reign lasts just a few million years. Then it's gone. But we'll get to that later. For now, just sit with this. You're watching the very end of an evolutionary dynasty. The final act in a strange, violent family saga. And that brings us back to Daeodon itself. Let's walk through what those bones actually show. The skull is the most striking part. More than 3 feet long, with a pronounced nasal region and huge temporal fenestrae, the openings in the skull where jaw muscles attach. That means bite force. Serious bite force. Enough to crack bones, maybe even skulls. Behind the jaw, the zygomatic arches, the cheekbones, are flared outward. That's where those bony flanges come in. They're not horns. They're not armored. They're probably not weapons. But they give the head a wide, fearsome look. Could be for visual signaling. Could be for mating displays. Could just be a byproduct of massive jaw muscle anchoring. The teeth? A mashup. Sharp incisors. Crushing premolars. Weirdly small molars for an animal this size. These aren't the chompers of a specialist predator. They're the tools of a generalist, built to tear, grind, snap, chew, whatever the situation called for. And the legs. Long, narrow, and fast-looking. The metapodials, those are the long bones between the ankle and the toes, suggest an animal that could cover serious ground. Not a sprinter. A strider. Something that traveled. Because that's the secret to Daeodon's success. It wasn't just big. It was mobile. It could move between kill sites, track herds, range across miles of open plain. This wasn't some lurking horror in the bushes. It was a patrolling terror. And now that you've traced its family tree, now that you understand it didn't just appear, but emerged, slowly and violently, you start to see it differently. Not just as a freak, not just a monster, but as the apex result of a long, strange experiment in survival. And that experiment is just about to hit its peak. You're close enough now to hear it breathe. The Daeodon you've been tracking has slowed its pace, weaving through a patch of open woodland at the edge of the grasslands. The light cuts through in patches, throwing its body into shifting patterns of muscle and shadow. It's not feeding, not yet. It's scouting, watching, listening. You get your first clean look at its whole body, and now we can really get into the mechanics of the beast. Because Daeodon wasn't just big and mean, it was engineered by millions of years of evolutionary pressure to be a terrifyingly efficient biological machine. Let's break it down piece by piece. Start with the legs. Daeodon didn't walk like a pig. Its legs were longer, straighter, and more gracile. Think more along the lines of a horse or a dog. That long-limbed build isn't for rooting around in muck. It's for covering distance. Each step is a stride, and it moves like it's got places to be, because it does. Its limb bones, especially the metacarpals and metatarsals, are elongated. These aren't built for tight turns in forested terrain. They're built for open country running, the kind of movement you see in cursorial animals. Those adapted for fast, sustained travel across big landscapes. What this really means, Daeodon wasn't just lurking around carcasses hoping to find scraps. It could go find them, chase them, steal them, kill them. It's standing still now, head turning slowly, ears twitching independently. You didn't notice the ears before, tall, mobile, pig-like but more expressive. They swivel to catch subtle sounds, the rustle of leaves, the chirp of Miocene birds, the thud of hooves miles away. Now the torso. Thick, solid, almost rectangular. A barrel of bone and muscle. That's where the engine is. Strong shoulders, deep chest, and a solid back. More like a rhino than a wolf. This isn't a sprinting predator. It's a powerhouse. It can accelerate when it has to, but its strength is in its ability to hold its ground. If you push it, it doesn't flinch. If it hits you, you'll stay down. The tail, short, thick at the base, tells you something else. It's not for balance at high speeds like in cats or kangaroos. It's more like a counterweight, a stabilizer. Then the head. The skull looks like it was designed by someone who only had destruction in mind. You've already seen how massive it is, up to 3 feet long, disproportionately large compared to the body. That skull isn't just for intimidation. It's a structural marvel. The jaw hinge sits far back, giving it a wide gape, like a crocodile. That means it could open its mouth wide enough to grab onto large prey or drag limbs off a carcass. The temporalis muscles, the ones that close the jaws, had huge attachment sites at the top and sides of the skull, especially around those cheek flanges. Translation, it had a monster bite. Maybe not as surgical as a saber-toothed cat, but stronger, deeper, more crushing. This wasn't a slicing bite. It was a pulverizing one. Let's talk teeth again. Canines, thick and robust. Not cat-like, but prominent. Incisors, small but useful for grabbing and pulling. Premolars, flattened, wide, with thick enamel, designed for bone cracking. Molars, less important, since Daeodon probably didn't do a lot of slow grinding. Altogether, this was a multi-tool mouth. One that could bite through hide, crush bones, strip meat, and even gnaw on roots or plant matter when the mood struck. But don't be fooled, everything about the skull screams, meat first. Now the neck. Short, thick, and muscular, built to hold up that heavy head and power those jaws. If it wanted to rip a carcass apart, it didn't need claws or finesse. It just had to clamp down and yank. That thick neck worked like a winch. Even its vertebrae are revealing. The spine was built for torsional strength, meaning it could twist its body without injury. Important when you're dragging prey or turning suddenly in a fight. Let's not ignore the skin and soft tissue. We can't fossilize skin usually, but we can make educated guesses. Daeodon probably had thick hide, maybe with sparse hair like modern pigs or warthogs. Some paleoartists give it a partial mane, a crest of bristled hair down the spine, for display or intimidation. And the face, oh the face. With those flanges and massive jaw muscles, its silhouette would have been unmistakable. Add a pair of small, keen eyes set forward and slightly to the side, perfect for binocular vision. That tells us Daeodon had decent depth perception. Not great, not cat level, but enough to judge distance in a fight or during a chase. We already mentioned the snout, elongated, sensitive, packed with olfactory tissue. It was probably its most important sensory tool. A living Daeodon would have smelled the world more than it saw or heard it. Blood, decay, fresh kill, even territorial markings. If something left a scent, Daeodon would find it. Here's something else to think about, its vocalizations. We don't have fossil evidence for that, obviously. But extrapolating from modern analogs, pigs, hippos, even bears, Daeodon likely made deep, resonant grunts, bellows, and roars. Intraspecies communication, territory warnings, maybe even mating calls. Low-frequency sounds that could travel across miles of open plains. Imagine hearing that across a silent Miocene night. A sound that's not quite pig, not quite bear, just deep, wet, and wrong. Something that tells every animal nearby, I'm awake, I'm hungry, and I will take what I want. Behavior-wise, everything about the build suggests aggression paired with mobility. It could travel far, fight hard, and feed on almost anything. That flexibility made it incredibly successful, for a while. You're starting to see how Daeodon fit into its ecosystem not just as a predator or scavenger, but as a force. A big, moving, bone-snapping pressure point on the whole Miocene web of life. It didn't have to kill often, but it could. It didn't have to chase far, but it could. Could do almost everything, except share. Because here's the thing. When you're built like this, when evolution hands you a skull like a boulder and teeth like pliers, you don't compromise. You take what you want. And that creates conflict, constant, brutal conflict. With rivals, with mates, with other species trying to move in on your turf. That's what this body was built for. Not peace, not balance, just raw, unfiltered dominance. So when it steps into the clearing and roars, not at you, but at the sky, the wind, the world, you finally get it. Daeodon wasn't just surviving. It was daring the world to stop it. You've seen Daeodon up close. You've followed it, broken down its anatomy, tracked its ancestry. Now it's time to zoom out, to look not just at the monster, but at the stage it played on. Because you can't really understand an animal without understanding the world that shaped it. And North America during the early Miocene? It was a place on the brink of massive ecological transformation. Let's start with the landscape. You're standing in what will someday be Nebraska, or maybe Wyoming. Right now, it's not barren prairie. It's a patchwork, open savanna-like grasslands mixed with scattered woodlands, river valleys, and seasonal wetlands. Trees still cling to life along streams, primitive maples, hickories, elms, but the dominance of forests is over. Grass is winning. This wasn't the tall, rich prairie grass you might think of today. These were tough, early grasses, low to the ground, adapted for dry conditions and grazing pressure. They're changing everything. Grasses grow from the base, not the tip, so they can survive teeth. That one trait will reshape the future of herbivores forever. But we're not there yet. The Miocene is transition in motion. And Daeodon is one of the transitional beasts. Not built for dense forest. Not quite built for the wide open plains of the future. It lives in the messy middle, a creature perfectly adapted to a shifting world. You walk through it now, silent and invisible, following not just the hell pig, but the context of its life. You see herds of rhinoceroses, surprisingly common in this era. Monoceros is the one you spot, a short, squat, two-horned rhino browsing on shrubs. Not the aggressive tanks we know today, but not helpless either. Daeodon wouldn't try to take one down unless it was desperate. Too risky. But if a calf lagged behind? If one stumbled, got sick? That's a different story. Then there are oreodonts, a weird group of extinct pig-sheep deer things. Dumb as bricks, slow and tasty. Perfect prey. You see them moving in herds, munching on the low brush, looking up with stupid eyes every time a branch cracks. Daeodon almost certainly hunted them, or at least stole kills from predators who did. You spot camels too, but not the desert kind. These are tall, lanky, giraffe-necked browsers called stenomylus. Built for speed, watching everything, skittish. One catches your ghostly scent, flicks its ears, and bolts in a blur. You're in a living diorama of evolutionary chaos. Herbivores are adapting to new food, new ground, new threats. And in the middle of it all, Daeodon. It's not alone. Let's talk about competition. Because no predator exists without enemies, and Daeodon had plenty. You hear the growl before you see them. A pack of early bear dogs, maybe amphibian. Built like shaggy tanks, with the power of a bear and the teeth of a wolf. These guys were trouble, powerful, social, clever. They could chase prey, scavenge kills, or defend a carcass from all comers. Daeodon didn't like running into these things, but it didn't back down either. Fossils suggest overlap in range and diet. They probably clashed. Sometimes the hell pig won. Sometimes it didn't. Then there were the early canids, proto-dogs. Not quite wolves, not yet. More like hyenas mixed with foxes. They traveled in loose groups, chased things down, and played the long game. Unlike Daeodon, they hunted in teams. That alone made them dangerous. But they weren't the real threat yet. Not yet. Right now, Daeodon owns this turf. Its only real competition comes from others of its own kind. You spot two of them in the distance, circling a downed animal. Some large herbivore, already half-eaten. They're not feeding. They're sizing each other up. Because that's the other part of Daeodon's world. Conflict. Not just hunting. Not just feeding. Dominance. Territory. Mating rights. You don't get that massive head, those strange flanges, that roaring, snarling behavior, unless fighting your own species is a regular part of your life. Some paleontologists believe Daeodons may have had social structures. Not cooperative hunting, but loose groups with constant testing, like modern boars or maybe even gorillas. Alpha individuals holding power until someone stronger came along. That would explain the heavy scarring on some fossil skulls. Healed fractures. Bite marks on jaws. These weren't injuries from prey. These were duels. You watch one of the two start forward, slow, deliberate. The other holds its ground, lowers its head, flexes its jaws. And then, it's over before it begins. The first one flinches. Backs off. No blood, no violence this time. Just a ritual. Contest of posture, eye contact, presence. When you're this big, fighting is expensive. You only risk it if you're sure. This is how power works here. Not by democracy. Not by strategy. Just by being the biggest, the loudest, the most dangerous thing on the plane. You keep moving, drifting ghost-like along the edge of a wide river. Here, the ecosystem is richer. Trees crowd the banks. You see primitive crocodiles sunning on the mud. Turtles the size of trash can lids. Massive birds, terror birds with hatchet beaks, stride through the grass like they own the place. Daeodon isn't afraid of them, but it watches them. Respect, maybe? Or just caution. That's the thing. Daeodon wasn't invincible. It didn't win every time. It was dominant, not untouchable. It had to choose its battles. It had to manage risk, just like every other animal. You see it now, moving along the riverbank. It pauses to drink, careful not to lower its head too long. Eyes up, ears twitching. It's always watching, always calculating. It leaves tracks in the mud. Huge, two-toed hoof prints, like a demonic deer. And they go on, as if it never stops moving. Because that's what it did. Wondered. Patrolled. Controlled. And maybe that's what made it so successful in this slice of time. It wasn't the fastest, or the smartest, or the best killer. But it was the most complete. Built for a world that hadn't yet decided what it wanted to be. The Miocene was chaos. And Daeodon thrived in chaos. This land, these half-grasslands, half-woodlands, it made the hell pig what it was. Gave it the space to grow, the prey to eat, the rivals to fight. It was a rough, transitional world. And Daeodon was its rough, transitional ruler. But that won't last. You can feel it coming. Something colder. Faster. Sharper. New challengers are just over the horizon. But for now, in this unstable kingdom of shifting soil and scattered trees, Daeodon reigns. It raises its head one more time. Sniffs the air. And walks on. Still looking. Always looking. There's a stillness now. Not silence. Miocene North America is never quiet, but a tense, watchful lull. The Daeodon you've been shadowing is alone again. It's moved into a shallow valley, where scrubby trees cling to the rocky soil and the air hangs thick with the scent of dust, sap, and decay. Something's changed in its posture. No longer just searching for food or rivals. Now it's patrolling. You watch its head tilt slightly. Nostrils flare. Ears lock forward. Something's nearby. And this is where you really start to see what made Daeodon more than just a big, mean omnivore. It wasn't just size. It wasn't just jaws. It was awareness. Territory. Control. This animal didn't survive by accident. It survived by owning space. Let's get into that. Daeodon didn't need to outrun everything. It didn't need to stalk like a lion or chase like a wolf. To use something else, presence. Every part of its body, every behavior, every reaction was tuned for intimidation and dominance. It didn't just move through a landscape, it claimed it. That started with its senses. We've already covered the power of its snout, a long nasal cavity with massive olfactory bulbs, suggesting an extremely acute sense of smell. If you left a carcass out for 5 minutes and sneezed on it, Daeodon could probably find it from miles away. But that's not the only thing it smelled. It could also detect territory, its own or others. Pheromones, dung, scent marking. The same way dogs can tell who's been where and when, Daeodon probably read the world like a map of smells. Territoriality, then, wasn't just instinct. It was a strategy. It could smell which paths were claimed, which kill sites were visited, which rivals were nearby. And it would react, either by avoiding conflict, or more often, by making its own claim louder. That brings us to vocalizations. Picture this, it's dusk. The sky's turning purple, the temperature's dropping. Most animals are winding down, but not Daeodon. It plants itself on a rocky rise, tips its head back, and roars. Not like a lion, not that clean or musical. This sound is deeper, rougher, built in the gut and pushed through massive lungs. It vibrates the earth, carries across miles. It's not just sound, it's a message. This is mine. This is me. Come test me if you want. We don't have recordings, obviously, but the structure of the skull and chest cavity suggests low-frequency sounds, the kind that travel. Think elephant rumbles or bison bellows. Other Daeodons would hear it, feel it, understand it, and they'd respond. Sometimes with silence, sometimes with their own calls, sometimes with violence. Now let's talk posture. When you watch a Daeodon walk into a space, it doesn't slink or skulk. It owns the ground under its feet. The way its shoulders roll, the way its head stays up, always alert but never frantic. It's the posture of an animal that doesn't fear competition. This is how it uses intimidation not just for hunting, but for displacement. That's the word paleontologists use when one animal forces another off a carcass or territory without a fight. Daeodon likely did that all the time. It didn't have to kill. It just had to show up. And that's power. It's not alone in this tactic. Modern animals do the same. Hyenas do it. Bears do it. Even wolves if they've got the numbers. It's energy efficient, get the food without burning the calories. But Daeodon took it to another level. That massive head wasn't just a weapon, it was a billboard. The bony flanges on its cheeks? Probably used to make it look bigger, meaner, more dangerous than it already was. In display terms, it's like wearing armor made of your own bones. And then there's the ritual aggression. You catch it now, just ahead, a scene unfolding. Two Daeodons meet. Not by accident. One has clearly entered another's territory. No carcass here. No prey. Just lines in the invisible dirt, and the need to enforce them. They circle. Heads low. Tails rigid. Every movement calculated. This isn't a full fight. It's a contest. A warning. You see a mock charge, just a few steps forward, then a stomp. The other freezes, flares its nostrils, lets out a deep, grinding snarl. No contact yet, but the air is heavy with it. Why this matters? Daeodons didn't fight constantly, but when they did, it wasn't just over food. It was about space. Territory. Mating rights. We know this from the damage on their fossils. Some skulls show fractures that had healed over, meaning they fought and survived. Others show unhealed wounds. They didn't all walk away. Even within the species, there was a hierarchy. Probably not a complex one, but enough to determine who got first pick at a kill, who got to breed, who got to stay, and who had to move on. All this, the smell, the sounds, the stance, the scars, it tells us one thing. Daeodon wasn't just a scavenger or hunter. It was a social competitor in a world where everything came down to presence and pressure. Now the fight begins. Not an all-out brawl, more like a test. One charges, full force. The other sidesteps, bites high. You hear the crack of jaws meeting bone. One bellows in rage, lunges again. It's brutal, fast, and short. And then, just like that, it's done. One backs off, bleeding, shaken. It turns, limps away. The victor doesn't pursue. It just stands, heaving, triumphant. No kill needed. The space is held. This is how Daeodon shaped its ecosystem, not just with predation, but with pressure. It forced other predators to plan around it. Forced herbivores to evolve better eyes, ears, legs. It reshaped the behavior of everything smaller than itself, just by existing. And now, as the survivor pants in the clearing, alone again, you realize what you're really watching. Not a monster. A strategy made of bone and muscle and rage. This is what dominance looked like in the Miocene. Daeodon doesn't sleep for long. Just an hour, maybe two. Lying half-curled in a shallow wallow, crusted in dirt and blood, sides moving in slow, deliberate rhythm. Then, eyes snap open. A twitch of the ears. Up on its feet. Why so fast? Because this isn't a world that rewards deep sleep. You're halfway through the Miocene now, and it's getting more crowded. The ecosystem is filling out. Evolution, driven by competition and chance, is working overtime. Old players are leaving. New ones are stepping in. And the ones that survive? They're changing fast. You've seen how Daeodon ruled through intimidation. Through presence. But now it's time to watch it struggle. Because the cracks in its dominance are beginning to show. Let's start with the changing herbivores. The days of sluggish oreodonts and careless browsers are numbered. You can already feel it, see it in the herds moving on the horizon. They're leaner now. Faster. Skittish to the point of paranoia. You spot a group of proto-antelopes sprinting across the scrub, bounding in wide arcs. You blink and they're gone. You weren't even that close. But they didn't take the risk. These aren't dumb, slow prey anymore. They're tuned for escape. Their eyes are high on their skulls. They can spot movement from across a plain. Their legs are long, their spines springy, their lungs huge. They don't wait to confirm a threat. They just go. Daeodon can't chase that. Not for long. Its body's built for power, not pursuit. You see the frustration in its pacing, the abortive charges it gives, only to stop after 20 yards. It doesn't like wasting energy. That means it has to adapt. It has to shift its diet, its behavior, its habits. And that's where things get interesting. Because while its hunting options are narrowing, its opportunism is expanding. Carrion, small prey, plant matter, even bone. If it can chew it, it'll eat it. That jaw? It's not just for killing, it's for pulverizing. You watch it dig into an old kill now. Not its own, probably a bear dog's. The flesh is gone, but the bones are thick, marrow-rich. Daeodon grips one in its jaws, crunches down with that enormous bite force, and splits it like a twig. You can hear it. That wet, fibrous snap. It's messy, primal, but it works. And that's the key. Daeodon is nothing if not adaptive. But so are its competitors. Let's talk about the new predators arriving on the scene. First, amphicyonids, the bear dogs. You've seen them before. Now they're bigger, more widespread, better organized. Some are massive, like Amphicyonian Injuns, 600 pounds of fur, teeth, and bad attitude. They can run faster, for longer. They can climb if they need to, and they hunt in loose packs. They're not just scavenging. They're hunting actively, and they're winning more of the time. And then, on the horizon, true canids are emerging. Fox-like at first, then wolf-like. Sleeker, smarter, faster. They operate with uncanny coordination. Daeodon may be the top dog now, but the dogs are learning. You follow one small pack now, 3 of them, trotting side by side along a dry creek bed. They're tracking something. You can see it in their posture. Alert, quiet, deliberate. They're not muscle like Daeodon. They're strategy. They're not ready to take it on head-to-head. Not yet. But you can feel the shift. Daeodon rules by force. These newcomers are starting to rule by intelligence. And that's not all. Let's not forget the avians, the giant birds of prey. Some are scavengers, sure, but others are active, precise killers. Terror birds are declining, but hawks, eagles, vultures, They're finding niches. Some even follow the hell pig. Yes, that's right. You look up and spot a trio of cathartes like vultures circling above. They're not here for a kill. They're here for what comes after. When Daeodon hunts, or when it scares something else off a carcass, there's usually leftovers. And these birds know that. Even in its success, Daeodon is now part of a larger chain. A system. Its dominance no longer means total control. It means everyone else has adapted to its presence. You start to understand something. This isn't just the rise of competition. It's the rise of ecological complexity. It's what always happens in ecosystems that mature. At first, the rules are simple. The big one eats the small one. Strength is king. But over time, things get messy. Strength alone isn't enough. You need efficiency. You need specialization. And that's where Daeodon starts to fall behind. Because specialization? That's not what it does. It's a generalist. A bruiser. A control predator. It's a creature of versatility. That's great, until everyone else around you is doing one thing extremely well. You watch one try to take down a juvenile camelid now. It's not fast enough. The chase lasts 12 seconds. The prey escapes with barely a scratch. Daeodon pants, frustrated. It doesn't give chase again. Just stands there, jaws slack, as dust settles around its feet. You can feel its world tightening. Territories are overlapping more. Fights are becoming more frequent. Injuries don't heal like they used to. And the margins for error? Thinner every year. Here's the thing. Daeodon doesn't go extinct tomorrow. It doesn't vanish in a single cataclysm. It fades. Slowly. Because in this changing world, everything is adapting, and Daeodon's brute force strategy is starting to show its limits. But that doesn't mean it gives up. That's what's compelling here. It's not dying. It's clinging. Fighting for every advantage. Shifting its range. Eating new things. Testing new behaviors. Doing what it's always done. Surviving. You follow one now, older, heavier, limping slightly. It's near the edge of its range. The vegetation is denser here. The terrain rockier. It shouldn't be here. And yet, it is. Because even as its reign is slipping, even as newer predators close in, Daeodon keeps moving forward. It's not dominance anymore. It's persistence. And in this moment, maybe that matters even more. You hear the buzz before you see the scene. Thick, slow-winged flies drift in lazy spirals above the kill. The air is ripe, sour meat, damp fur, blood baking in the sun. And there, standing broad-legged over the carcass, jaws slick and eyes alert, is the Daeodon. But this isn't a clean hunt. The animal it feeds on, a juvenile teleoceras, one of the squat, hippo-like rhinos of the time, wasn't killed by Daeodon. You can tell. The wounds are ragged and deep, but not the kind its crushing jaws would leave. These look like punctures, like the bite of something else. And that's what this chapter is really about. Scavenging, stealing, surviving on the margins. Daeodon is still powerful. Still dangerous. But it's playing a different game now. One that relies less on conquest and more on calculation. Let's break that down. Scavenging isn't a sign of weakness. Not in a world like this. In fact, it's often smarter than chasing down prey that can outrun you. You burn fewer calories. You take fewer risks. You live longer. That's the trade-off. And Daeodon? It's learning. You follow it from a distance. It moves slowly through a sun-drenched woodland. It's not hunting. It's listening, smelling, reading the signs. Here, tufts of fur snagged on low branches. There, tracks in the dusty soil. Buzzards in the sky. It starts to move faster now. It's zeroing in. Something died recently. Something big. And here's where Daeodon's role shifts, from hunter to displacer. Because it doesn't always need to make the kill. It just needs to get there after, and convince whoever's eating to step aside. That's exactly what happens next. A young amphibian is at the kill. Smaller than most of its kind, maybe inexperienced, maybe just reckless. It growls softly, head down, chewing fast. Then Daeodon steps out of the brush. No sound, just presence. That massive silhouette. The broad shoulders. The wide, bone-armored face. The bear dog freezes. Eyes lock. Then, slow and deliberate, it backs away. No fight. No challenge. Just instinct. Don't die today. That's the power Daeodon still holds. Not everywhere. Not with everyone. But in moments like this, it still wins. And yet, there's always tension. Because sometimes the other predators don't back down. You see it the next day. Another carcass. Another Daeodon. But this time, it's not alone. 2 Isengrinia, early, wolf-like canids, stand just off to the side. Not as strong, but faster, more agile. They dart in when Daeodon looks away, tear off bits of meat, retreat. Nipping, testing, taunting. Daeodon snarls, lunges, chases them off. But it's tiring. The heat is brutal. The meat is drying out. And the pack is patient. This is the new threat, not brute force, but attrition. Daeodon is strong, but it's not infinite. Eventually, it leaves. The canids close in behind, silent and satisfied. You're watching an old model of dominance collide with a new kind of cunning. And it's not just scavenging that's changing. It's the landscape itself. The Miocene is shifting again. Grasslands are expanding. Forests retreating. Water sources are becoming seasonal, unpredictable. You travel with a Daeodon as it moves between shrinking streams and ephemeral ponds, searching for food that used to be easier to find. There are more dry crossings now. More heat. The prey is more mobile, harder to catch. The bones are picked cleaner. Competition is constant. This isn't just about eating anymore. It's about endurance. And Daeodon? It endures. Barely. It eats what it can. A scavenged rabbit here. Roots and tubers there. The occasional slow-moving tortoise. It crunches through the shell with effort, licking the meat from within. You watch it chew bark, swallow insects, dig up half-rotted bulbs. It's not proud. It's not picky. It's just alive. And still, every now and then, it asserts itself. You see it happen during a dry season convergence at a dying riverbed. Dozens of species crowd the mud. Herbivores, predators, everything in between. It's a place of uneasy truce. But when Daeodon shows up, the mood shifts. It doesn't roar, doesn't charge, just walks forward. Every other animal watches, waits, and then, quietly, subtly, they make room. That's legacy. That's memory etched into instinct. Even now, even fading, Daeodon still commands respect. But not forever, because as time wears on, that fear erodes. The younger predators don't remember the old power. They've grown up in a different world. Faster, sharper, more complex. And when they test Daeodon, sometimes they win. You witness one of those moments now. A weakened Daeodon, thin, limping, its coat patchy, approaches a carcass at dusk. But a trio of Baraphogenes, bone-crushing dogs, are already there. They don't move. They growl. Daeodon hesitates. Then, for the first time in hours, you see something remarkable. It turns around. No fight. No bluff. No roar. Just a quiet, exhausted retreat. It's not a defeat in battle. It's a shift in the order. The reign is ending, not with drama, but with a slow unraveling of instinct, of fear, of memory. And yet, even now, there's dignity in it. You watch as the old giant disappears into the darkening brush. Still upright, still walking, religious, but also a survivor. Still trying, still there. You wake before dawn. The Miocene sky is a bruised gray, stars fading as the heat of another day begins to rise from the soil. It's quiet, eerily so. No bird calls yet. No wind. Just the stillness of early light. And in that stillness, you see it. A solitary Daeodon, silhouetted against the horizon, walking slow and stiff through the open scrub. Not limping, exactly, but not moving like it used to. This one is old. You can tell by the scars across its hide, long-heeled, but deep. You can tell by its sun-bleached fur, patchy and thin. The way it walks slightly hunched. The way it pauses at intervals, sniffing, waiting, almost as if unsure what to do next. We're in the twilight of the Hell Pig now. This section isn't about triumphs. Not anymore. It's about decline. Not the sudden, fiery fall you get with a meteor or a volcano, but the slow, grinding fade of an animal whose time has passed. Daeodon isn't gone yet, but you're going to watch how it becomes gone. Let's start with the obvious, its numbers. They're lower, much lower. You used to spot them once or twice a day, sometimes in pairs, sometimes in overlapping ranges. But you've gone weeks without seeing a single one. And when you do see one, it's always like this, alone, cautious, walking the edge of its territory like it's not sure it still owns it. The land is changing faster than Daeodon can keep up. Grasslands have exploded. The old, dappled forests where it could ambush and intimidate, they've thinned out. Visibility is higher. Prey sees you coming. And the new herbivores are even faster, even twitchier. Meanwhile, the predators that once gave it a wide berth, they've grown smarter. You watch a standoff now. Daeodon comes upon a carcass, fresh, maybe an hour old. A juvenile Merychippus, the early three-toed horse. It approaches, slow and deliberate, ready to claim it. But waiting nearby is a small pack of Epicyon haydeni, one of the most advanced of the bone-crushing dogs. Not as heavy as Daeodon, but faster, coordinated, and relentless. They don't charge. They don't need to. They just circle, bark, flank, wear it down. You can see the calculation in the Daeodon's eyes. Risk versus reward. It's hungry, but not starving. The meat is fresh, but not essential. The pack is young, but aggressive. It backs off. And that's the pattern. Daeodon is being squeezed. Not by one killer, but by a dozen small ones. Not by a superior species, but by an evolved system where it no longer fits. Its body, once its biggest asset, is now a liability. Too big to chase fast prey. Too slow to escape fights. Too intimidating to go unnoticed. In a way, it's trapped in its own legend. You start to wonder how it lasts at all. But then you see it again. Those sparks of survival. The ones that keep you from calling it extinct just yet. You watch this old Daeodon dig. Not for roots, this time, for water. A shallow depression lined with cracked mud. It sniffs, then starts pawing, methodically, until it hits moisture. Not a pool, just damp soil. Enough to press its muzzle into. Enough to drink. That's not brute force. That's memory. Knowledge passed through generations. And still, it's not enough. You start noticing something else now. Their absence. Not just fewer individuals, but fewer signs. Fewer tracks. Fewer scat piles. Fewer territorial marks. Those signature rubs against trees or sprays of scent along game trails. You're not seeing the scratch marks, the broken branches, the subtle announcements of, I am here. Because maybe they're not. There's a word for this phase in ecology, extirpation. It's not extinction yet. It's regional disappearance. A species retreating from parts of its former range, bit by bit. Not because it's dead everywhere, just not viable here anymore. And Daeodon? It's retreating hard. You hike north, further inland, toward the cooler highlands. Here, the land is rougher, less grass, more thickets, more rock. It's not prime hunting ground, but it's quieter. Fewer competitors. And there, finally you find one. Smaller than average. Maybe female. Maybe a juvenile. Watching you from between the stones, unmoving. Then it slips away, noiseless, like a ghost. That's what they are now. Ghosts of what they were. Let's zoom out. Geological records show Daeodon's presence for a few million years, most notably in the central and western parts of what's now North America. But the last fossils we find? They're fewer. Fragmented. Scattered. It's not a hard extinction line. It's a disappearance gradient. One decade they're dominant. The next for 100,000 years later, but no single reason. Just ecological death by 1,000 cuts. Climate change made the land drier. Prey got faster, more agile, more aware. Predators got smarter, more social, more strategic. Forests shrank. Grasslands expanded. Visibility killed the ambush. And Daeodon? It was too specialized in being unspecialized. It held power when power was the winning hand. But now, versatility isn't enough. Not here. Not anymore. You think of it like an old king wandering a realm that no longer bows. Not because it was overthrown, but because the people changed. The world moved on. And still it looks. Still breathes. Still tries. This one you're watching now, it pauses beneath a dying tree. Sniffs the air. Then sits. Not resting. Just waiting. Not for a hunt. Not for a fight. Just waiting. Like something that knows its time is over, but hasn't yet figured out what to do with the end. You've been watching this one Daeodon for weeks now. The old male. Scarred, sun-bleached, quiet. He's not just surviving anymore, he's lingering. At this point, he barely covers ground. Maybe a few kilometers a day, sticking close to a stretch of rocky, brushy hillside with enough cover to hide in and just enough food to stay alive. He's not defending territory. Not scent marking. Not roaring. That's over. What he's doing now is something far more basic, existing. And it's in this silence, this long, slow fade, that you start to feel the weight of what extinction actually looks like. It's not a drama, not a final battle. It's not even noticed by the other animals. It's just one day after another where there are fewer prints, fewer sounds, fewer living memories of what once ruled these plains. The Daeodon doesn't know it's the last of anything. It's not looking around wondering why its kind is gone. It's just hungry, just tired, just older than its bones can handle. But you see the gaps where Daeodon once shaped the ecosystem. You watch how prey animals no longer flinch when they smell its scent. You see smaller predators occupying the kills it once took for itself. You see the ripple of absence, and it's unsettling. Because whether or not this individual survives another week isn't the question anymore. The question is, what comes after? Let's pause here. Look at what Daeodon was to this place. It wasn't just a killer. It was a keystone threat. A walking balance beam. Its presence altered behavior of prey, of rival predators, of entire herds. It enforced caution. It suppressed overpopulation. It created opportunity for scavengers. Without it, things shift. You've already started to see it. The mesopredators, those mid-sized carnivores like Barophagus, Epicyon, and the early Canis species, are becoming bolder. Their populations rise. They take on bigger prey. But without a top dog keeping them in check, competition spikes. And that's when the system destabilizes. You see more failed hunts. More infighting. Packs turning on each other. Territory disputes erupting more often. And the herbivores? They're changing too. The ones that once evolved for speed and skittish behavior now have one less thing to fear. You notice the Merychippus herds becoming lazier near water sources. The Procamelus, those early camel relatives, linger longer at the edge of the scrublands. That edge, once dangerous ground, is now just ground. You realize you're watching a vacuum open. And nature hates a vacuum. In this gap, other apex predators start rising. Not individuals, lineages. The bear dogs. The bone crushers. The wolves. Each one testing a new version of what Daeodon used to be. Faster than Daeodon, but less imposing. Smarter in packs, but weaker alone. More agile, less armored. And in time, they'll do more than fill the space. They'll replace it. But that's not now. That's still thousands of years away. For now, the Daeodon is still walking. You track it through a final dry season. Water's almost gone. The brush crackles underfoot. Insects hum at dawn and vanish by noon. The Daeodon finds a half-dead tree and lays beneath it. Doesn't move for hours. It's not sick. Just tired in a way that goes deeper than injury or age. You know what's coming. One night, the temperature drops hard. Not enough to kill, but enough to change things. The old male doesn't stir at sunrise. You approach quietly, slowly. And there it is. Still, no struggle. No predator wounds. Just still. The body cools. The scavengers come later. Crows, beetles, a lone fox. They don't hesitate. They don't care about legacy. But you do. You remember what this was. You remember the thundering chases. The dominance displays. The jaws cracking bones. The roars that once silenced entire clearings. You remember the Daeodon not as a relic, but as a force. And now you're watching the closing credits. It hits differently when it's not abstract. Not a species vanishing on paper. Not a chart with a downward slope. Just one massive body cooling in the dirt, a life ending the way all lives do, but this one taking an entire era with it. The last echo of something that used to shake the ground. You sit there a while. Long enough for the flies to come. Long enough for the sun to change angles. And then, eventually, you walk away. Because that's the thing. The world keeps going. Even as it forgets. The wind cuts differently now. You've moved forward, not in time, but in understanding. Because while Daeodon slips into memory, the world around it is still shifting. You're still standing in the Miocene, but the players on the stage have changed their lines, and the spotlight has swung elsewhere. It's not about what just died. It's about what's coming next. And what's coming is leaner, faster, more focused. The predators no longer look like nightmare pigs or oversized hyenas. They don't lumber, they run. They don't bluff charge, they coordinate. They don't survive by intimidation, they survive by precision. You're about to meet the true carnivores. Here's where things start getting sharp. Quite literally. Let's start with the dogs. Not your modern domestic pups. Not yet, but their evolutionary groundwork. You're looking at canids like Epicyon haydeni and Barophagus. These aren't elegant wolves. They're heavy-jawed, low-slung, and made to crack bone. Think of them like bulldozers with teeth. But the genius of these creatures wasn't just in the bite, it was in the strategy. You follow a group of Barophagus across an open plain. They're not scattered, they're moving together. Not quite a pack like wolves, but the idea is there. They coordinate. One tracks the scent, two more flank. They don't have to be faster than the prey, they just have to be smarter than it. And they are. You watch them take down a mid-sized camel relative. It's over in under a minute. There's no wasted motion. No posturing. Just a clean, brutal kill. Then they eat fast, ears twitching for any sign of bigger scavengers. They're not the biggest carnivores around. Not yet. But they're efficient. And that's the start of something new. Next up, the saber-toothed cats. Now, you're not yet at Smilodon. That icon comes later. But what you do see are the first prototypes of what will become the most specialized predators of the coming epochs. Amphimacharidas, Pseudilurus, early Machaerodontines. They're smaller than what we think of as saber-toothed cats, but you already see the trend forming. Shortened skulls, elongated canines, hyper-powerful forelimbs. They're built not to chase, but to ambush and overpower. You watch one stalk through the edge of a regrowing forest. It doesn't roar, doesn't growl, just slides forward like smoke. Its prey, an unwary antelope relative, never sees it coming. The cat clamps onto the neck with those saber teeth and holds. Seconds later, the body drops. That's the difference. Daeodon overpowered. These cats executed. It's not brute strength anymore. It's surgical violence. And then there are the bears. They're still evolving. Still not the monsters they'll one day become. But the early ursoids are starting to assert themselves in this ecosystem. Broad paws. Omnivorous stomachs. But a growing edge of predatory instinct. They're testing the waters. One young bear roots through a carcass. You saw the kill happen. An Epicyon pack brought it down. But now, the bear is here. No fight. No fuss. The dogs just leave. But because the bear's bigger. Poor, yes, but solid. Immovable. You're seeing a new balance form. One where size isn't enough, but combined with cunning, it still matters. In this evolving food web, you start to realize something critical. Daeodon was a transitional apex. Not the endgame. Not a perfected model. Just one version of top-tier predation, and a temporary one. The predators replacing it aren't more terrifying. They're more optimized. Each one taking a slice of Daeodon's old role, and doing it better in one way. The saber-tooths are better at focused killing. The dogs are better at cooperative hunting. The bears are better at endurance and defense. Instead of one towering generalist ruling through fear, you now have specialists carving up the ecosystem. This creates resilience. A Daeodon can be taken out, and the system wobbles. But a network of smaller predators? It's harder to knock that over. They balance each other. They check each other's growth. They evolve in response to each other. You're watching a kind of arms race begin, one that will escalate for millions of years. The prey respond to Merychippus becomes more refined. Teeth get tougher. Limbs grow longer. Nervous systems become faster, more responsive. Camouflage evolves. Herd structures become tighter. You see the first alert systems form. A cough, a flick of the ear, a ripple of tension through a group of grazing ungulates, and the whole field lifts its head in unison. There's a kind of intelligence in the air now. Not individual brilliance, but collective adaptation. That's what's taking shape as Daeodon fades out. It's not just the rise of new predators. It's the evolution of ecosystems into dynamic, responsive systems. A chessboard where every move is countered within a generation or two. No more single monsters dominating the board. Just specialists, strategies, and subtle shifts. Here's something else you notice. The quiet. Not like the silence when Daeodon walked and everything fled. This is tension. A stillness where everyone's listening. Judging. Waiting. Because now, death doesn't come with a roar. It comes with a whisper, a blur, a snap of jaws you didn't see coming. The age of dominance is over. The age of precision has begun. There's no funeral for an apex predator. No sudden final showdown. No flaming extinction event. No dramatic toppling of the king by some fresher, stronger rival. Daeodon didn't go out in a blaze. It didn't even go out all at once. It just faded. You walk the Miocene plains now and you can feel the absence. The shape of Daeodon is still implied. In carcasses uneaten, in predator hierarchies scrambled, in the confidence of scavengers who used to keep their distance. But the animals don't know what's missing. You do. So let's be specific. Let's break it down. How does something like Daeodon, the terrible pig, the apex bone smasher of its time, actually disappear from an ecosystem it once dominated? First, let's talk geography. Daeodon's stronghold was the Great Plains of mid-North America, Nebraska, South Dakota, Wyoming. That used to be a patchwork of open grasslands, wooded river valleys, and lush floodplains. But around 18 million years ago, something starts to shift. It's subtle at first. Rainfall becomes more seasonal. Then it becomes less frequent. The woodlands shrink. The river systems become more erratic. Open plains expand. What does this mean for Daeodon? Well, it's built for mixed terrain. Ambush from the trees, chase across the open. Less tree cover means fewer ambushes. Fewer places to cache food. And more line-of-sight competition with faster predators that can outmaneuver it. The ground under its feet is turning against it. Then come the rivals. Epicyon-Hadney, Barophagus, the early Canis types. These canids aren't as large, but they hunt in coordinated groups. They're smart, agile, and crucially, they can cover more ground more efficiently. Daeodon? It's still walking solo, still built like a tank, but the war has changed, and it doesn't know how to fight it anymore. Let's not forget the prey. Back when Daeodon was king, herbivores were mostly small to medium-sized, and not too fast. But as grasslands spread, you start to get animals like Merychippus, horse relatives that can run. Really run. Long limbs, fused bones, powerful lungs. Now picture a Daeodon trying to chase one of those across a sun-baked plain. It's not built for endurance. It doesn't have the lung capacity. It loses. So Daeodon becomes more scavenger than hunter. It starts depending on stolen kills, surprise ambushes, and luck. And even those options start to dry up, because the other predators are getting better, and faster, and more numerous. Competition ramps up. Territories get smaller. Resources get tighter. And in evolutionary time, Daeodon's kind begins to collapse inward. We see it in the fossil record. By 16 million years ago, the number of Daeodon remains in fossil beds starts to drop. You go from dozens of individuals per layer to a few, then fewer. We don't see evidence of a catastrophic die-off. No sign of a pandemic, volcanic winter, or asteroid. What we see is attrition. And here's where it gets interesting. Because even as the Daeodon population dwindles, their form echoes forward. Some younger Daeodon fossils show slight changes, reduced size, slimmer jaws, more delicate bone structures. Maybe adaptations, maybe desperation, but it doesn't work, because they're trying to pivot in a world that's already moved on. The niche they ruled is gone. The game has changed, and evolution doesn't wait. By around 15 million years ago, Daeodon is functionally extinct. Maybe a few individuals persist in isolated regions, but there's no viable population, no future, gone. No fossils above that line. No bones, no teeth, no footprints. Just silence. And you stand there on that Miocene plain, looking around, trying to imagine what it felt like, that final moment where no Daeodon remained. It would have passed unnoticed. One day, the last one simply didn't wake up. No one paused. The scavengers ate. The bones cracked. The wind blew. And that was it. But the echoes linger. In the way dogs hunt. In the fear herbivores still carry. In the shape of predator-prey dynamics that kept evolving after Daeodon vanished. You see, extinction doesn't end the story. It just changes the narrator. Because now, it's Barophagus patrolling the kill sites. It's Amphimacheridatus lurking in the reeds. It's Epicyon scouting the ridgeline. Each one owes something to Daeodon. Not directly. Not genetically. But structurally. Daeodon proved that mass, intimidation, and jaw force could rule an ecosystem, for a while. It showed what a top-tier omnivore could be. It left a footprint that shaped everything that came after. And now that it's gone, that footprint becomes available. A niche opens. A role begs to be filled. Nature always notices when power leaves the room. So the carnivores rise. And the world forgets. You look back one more time. Imagine a time when the grass parted and something the size of a bison with the skull of a war god came walking through, jaws dripping, eyes fixed. Now it's a memory. Now it's bone. Now it's ours to remember or not. And that's the most haunting part, how quiet the end was. You're no longer standing on Miocene plains. Not literally, anyway. The wind's gone. The sky's gone. The animals, all of them, are dust. But the bones are still here. Now you're in a lab. Or a warehouse. Maybe a university basement with humming fluorescent lights. You're surrounded by drawers, trays, and sealed cases, each labeled with neat little tags that mean everything to the people who know how to read them. This is where Daeodon lives now. In fragments. And this is where the Real story begins. Again. See, extinction doesn't kill curiosity. If anything, it feeds it. When scientists first started pulling these bones out of the ground in the 1800s, they didn't know what they were looking at. Some thought they had a giant pig. Others guessed a carnivore. The skulls were long, the teeth were confusing, and nothing matched what was already known. The first name slapped on it was Dinoheus, terrible pig. It stuck for a while. But as more bones came out of Nebraska's agate fossil beds and other sites across the Great Plains, paleontologists began connecting the dots. They weren't just looking at pigs. These things were entelodonts, a separate, now extinct branch of artiodactyls. Even-toed ungulates, yes, but weird ones. On the outside, Daeodon looked like some horrifying hybrid, part boar, part bear, part nightmare. But inside, it was a lesson in misdirection. Let's talk about that skull. A typical Daeodon skull is about 90 centimeters long, nearly the size of a small child. It's thick, heavy, and flared outward with bony projections. Those weren't just decorative. They anchored massive jaw muscles, the kind you only find in things that chew through bone. In fact, some of those muscle scars rival what you'd find in big cats or hyenas. Now look at the teeth. You'd expect simple meat-shredding blades from a carnivore. But Daeodon's teeth tell a stranger story. Sharp incisors and canines? But then there are crushing molars and premolars, omnivore gear, not predatorily. This animal ate everything. Bone, meat, carrion, maybe even tubers and roots. If it could bite it, it probably tried. So, the bone record tells us this wasn't a picky eater, it was a survival machine. That's part of what made it so dominant, and maybe what made it so fragile once the ecosystem changed. Now move to the limbs. Daeodon's legs are long, built more like a cursorial, running animal than a rooting pig. The limbs end in hooves, not claws. This wasn't a digger. It was a walker, a strider. The fossil where patterns on the feet suggest miles of travel. Daeodon didn't ambush from the bushes and go home. It covered ground, crossed open plains, scouted riverbanks, wandered for food. This is how paleontologists read a life from bones. It's detective work. And it's messy. Every answer throws up more questions. Here's one of the biggest. How social was Daeodon? You look at modern pigs, and they're often social. So are some predators. But entelodonts? Hard to say. At agate fossil beds, multiple Daeodon individuals were found in close proximity, some even preserved with evidence of bite marks on their skulls, possibly from other Daeodons. That might suggest intraspecies violence. Fights for dominance, territory, or food. It could also point to a kind of social structure. Dominance hierarchies. Territorial patrols. Maybe even family groups. But here's the rub, fossils don't talk. You don't know if those bite marks came from fights during life or scavenging after death. You don't know if Daeodon was a pack hunter or a solitary bruiser. All you can do is infer. Compare. Model. And here's where the modern side of paleontology kicks in. 3D scans. CT imaging. Finite element analysis. Teams now model Daeodon skulls digitally to simulate bite forces. They run stress tests on virtual bones to see how they cracked prey. They reconstruct gait and muscle mass using biomechanical software. And every time they do, the same picture keeps emerging. This thing was overbuilt. Like it had too much power, too much redundancy. Its jaws could shatter bone, but its eyes were set wide. Not great for depth perception. Its body was strong, but maybe not nimble. Its brain? Not small, but not impressive either. That kind of over-design works when you're the top dog. Not so much when the world demands speed and adaptability. But that doesn't stop scientists from being obsessed with it. They've been writing papers on entelodonts for over a century. Still are. Still arguing over taxonomy. Is Dinoheus just another name for Daeodon? Answer, yes. Should entelodonts be lumped closer to hippos, or pigs, or something else entirely? The fossil evidence doesn't care. It just sits there in drawers and plaster jackets, waiting for the next generation to try again. You can walk through any decent natural history museum and find a Daeodon skeleton posed in a dynamic lunge, jaws agape, bones slightly oversized for effect. Kids love it. Adults pause. Everyone stares at the teeth. It doesn't matter that it's extinct. In that moment, it's alive again. And behind the scenes, in academic journals and quiet university offices, the real work continues. Because here's the strange truth. Fossils don't explain themselves. People do. And every scientist who touches a Daeodon fossil adds a layer of insight, of guesswork, of storytelling. This animal lives through interpretation. So the fossil record becomes more than just bones. It becomes a dialogue between what once was and what we dare to imagine now. And you, standing in the quiet room with drawers full of ancient skulls, realize something. This isn't the end of the story. This is the translation. This is how Daeodon survives, not in flesh, but in thought. You've seen what the bones can tell us. Now let's talk about what we do with those bones. Because the minute Daeodon entered human imagination, it stopped being just a set of measurements and started becoming something else. We gave it personality, attitude, a face. And that face has changed a lot. Start with the early illustrations, late 1800s, early 1900s. Back then, Daeodon was usually shown like a monstrous pig with exaggerated tusks and a hunchback. It stood awkwardly, often alone, glaring off into the middle distance. The muscles were guesswork. The eyes looked wrong, but it felt terrifying. That was the point. It was less about accuracy, more about awe. Remember, this was the same period when saber-toothed cats were drawn like lions on steroids, and mammoths were lumbering shaggy tanks. Daeodon joined the ranks of prehistoric giants, creatures meant to overwhelm, to remind us how small and soft we are. Then came the mid-20th century. Paleoart matured a little. Artists started studying anatomy more closely, trying to match muscle to bone, posture to real-world analogs. Daeodon began to lose some of its cartoonish features. But it never lost its edge. Even in more refined art, it was always painted in the middle of something violent. Stealing a kill. Fighting another Daeodon. Staring down an amphicyanid with bloody jaws. The narrative was clear. This wasn't just an animal, it was a monster. Then pop culture caught wind. You start seeing Daeodon-like creatures in monster movies, games, comics. Sometimes it's called an Intellidon, sometimes just Hell Pig. The name sticks. People love it. Hell Pig. That's the brand. Doesn't matter that it's not a pig. Doesn't matter that it was omnivorous, or possibly cautious, or maybe even shy. Once that name hits, it locks in. And now, Daeodon becomes something else entirely. It's not just a real animal anymore. It's a symbol. But what? Depends who's holding the pen. For some, it's pure prehistoric chaos. A throwback to a time when nature made nightmares just because it could. For others, it's a cautionary tale. A reminder that even the most brutal predator can't outlast change. For paleo artists, it's a challenge. How do you take something that looks like a skeletal horror and make it look like it lived? Because here's the thing, good paleo art doesn't just copy bones. It restores life. Muscle, skin, posture, behavior. Artists ask, what did it look like running? Sleeping? Mating? Dying? Some show Daeodon covered in scars, ears torn, eyes small and cruel. Others depict it more like a bear or hyena, alert, cautious, intelligent. And every version tells you something different. It's like that famous line, every portrait is a self-portrait. Paleo art is the same. How we draw a Daeodon says more about us than it ever does about the animal. Look at recent restorations, 2010s and onward. You'll see versions with bristly hair, canine-like alertness, and even complex social interaction. Not just solitary monsters, but part of a larger ecosystem with behavioral nuance. Mothers and offspring. Fights and reconciliations. That's progress. We're moving from fear to fascination. From demonizing to understanding. And yet, the monster always lingers around the edges. You can't unsee those jaws. Video games get in on it too. Daeodon shows up in titles like Ark, Survival Evolved, reimagined as a tanky bruiser with regenerating health, something players send into battle. It's not science, but it taps into something real, the presence of Daeodon, the sheer weight of it, the implied danger, the idea that this thing didn't just eat, it dominated. That idea sticks in people's minds. And then there are the documentaries. They all use the same playbook, deep voiceover, dramatic music, and a slow-motion charge across the screen. Daeodon lunging at camera. Daeodon biting a corpse. Daeodon being Daeodon. Which, let's be honest, is kind of awesome, but also kind of reductive. Because Daeodon didn't live in a vacuum. It didn't exist just to scare us. It existed to survive. Like every other animal. But we love making monsters. There's comfort in that. If it was just a beast, then we don't have to think too hard. But if it was a creature, with instincts, pressures, vulnerabilities, that's harder. That makes us look inward. So Daeodon bounces between two poles, fact and fiction. The real animal, a complex, adaptable, once successful omnivore. And the myth, hell pig, bone crusher, apex nightmare. Both live in museums, in games, in our heads. And both have value. Because stories aren't lies. They're how we make sense of things too big, too old, or too broken to fully grasp. And in the end, Daeodon has become a kind of mirror. It reflects our fears, our awe, our hunger for understanding, and our inability to let the past stay quiet. You look at its skull, wide and scarred, jaws parted as if mid-scream, and you can almost hear it ask, "What did you see in me?" And your answer? Everything. And now we come full circle. You're back on that ancient plane. No museum walls, no desk lights, no glass cases. Just open sky. Tall grass rustling in a breeze that hasn't blown in 10 million years. The heat is dry. The sun's low. Somewhere nearby, something heavy moves through the undergrowth. You're not alone. Daeodon is here. It doesn't charge. It doesn't roar. It stands still watching. A body like a battering ram. A head that could crush bone like fruit. But it doesn't move. You hold its gaze. And it holds yours. What you feel isn't fear. It's something older. Heavier. A deep time connection with a creature that once owned this place, however briefly. A ghost of the land. An echo. That's the thing with Daeodon. It didn't last long. In evolutionary terms, it was a flare in the dark. Just a few million years of dominance, maybe less. Then gone. Wiped out by climate, competition, and change. But somehow, it left an outsized footprint on the story of life. And on you. Because you can't shake it now. You followed this animal from its skull to its stride, from its ancestors to its extinction, from dust to myth and back again. You've watched it fight, feed, wander, die. And you've seen how its bones became puzzles. How its image became stories. So now, when you picture Daeodon, you don't see just a monster. You see a moment, a snapshot of life in motion. An animal that didn't know it would be remembered. That didn't care about legacy. It only wanted to live. And for a time it did. Beautifully. Brutally. Completely. That's the truth most people miss. Daeodon didn't rule the world. It didn't rewrite ecosystems. It wasn't a game changer. It was just one of many. But what it was perfectly itself. Big, strange, hungry, dangerous. An animal that evolved to fit a moment in time, and when that moment passed, so did it. No tragedy. No failure. Just nature doing what it always does. Move forward. And here's where it matters to you. Because if you zoom out, way out, you start to see the pattern. Nothing lasts forever. Every top predator, every perfect adaptation, every reign of terror or beauty ends. Daeodon didn't fall because it was flawed. It fell because the world changed. That's the part that sticks with you. Because it's not just a lesson in paleontology. It's a reminder. Change comes. Sometimes slow. Sometimes sudden. And when it does, even the biggest jaws, the thickest bones, the sharpest teeth can't hold it back. You remember that in your own life. In your own small stretch of time. Daeodon's story becomes more than just a bedtime distraction. It becomes a quiet whisper from a deeper world. Be here. While you can. The ghost in the grass doesn't speak. But it doesn't have to. It turns. Moves off through the brush. Its footsteps fade. And you're left standing there, under that impossibly ancient sky, with a weight in your chest and a silence in your ears. Not afraid. Just awake. You know what this was. You'll carry it now. Not just the facts. Not just the images. The feel of it. That matters. It always has. Your eyes are getting heavy now. But let them. Forget the bones. Forget the diagrams. Just drift back through the grasslands one last time. You're not walking now. You're floating. Like wind. Like memory. Like a breath through the ribs of a long-dead skull. The air smells like dry earth. Distant rain. The sharp edge of something old. You pass over a sleeping herd of grazing animals. Tiny horses, primitive camels, deer-like browsers. They barely notice. You pass over a dried-out riverbed. Over a buried skull with cracked teeth. Over the shadows of things that were. And then you see it again. Far away. A dark shape. Massive. Still, Daeodon. It doesn't move. Doesn't need to. Just watches the plains it once ruled. One last time. And then, like mist in the morning, it's gone. The land is empty. Quiet. At peace. You feel your own breath slow. Your heartbeat ease. Like the story has settled into you now. Like you've walked far enough. And as you sink deeper into sleep, one last thought drifts through your mind. Every creature, every moment, every story leaves a trace. And sometimes, in the stillness, those traces find their way back. Even the biggest beasts. Even the briefest reigns. Even the monsters we once called real. Sleep now. You've walked with giants. You've seen the bones. And now you rest.